Welcome everyone to TPN's POPI-Portal, our first webinar for the year. Welcome Peter.
Welcome Michelle, good morning everybody, and happy 2021.
Yay, it's a new year and we're going to start it on POPI compliance.
100%. We are actually taking you through the finance function today. It is module 2 of 10. We actually did the first module in 2020, right at the end. It is up on the TPN YouTube channel for you to go and have a look at if you did not follow the first module with us. But like I said, today we are going to take you through the finance function.
So Peter, this POPI-Portal has been designed in this version specifically for the property market.
Yes.
So that means tenants and landlords.
Of course.
And?
Sales agents, of course managing agents as well, so people managing body corporates or HOAs can obviously also use the system.
So if you have a business and you are collecting personal information as it relates to a buyer, a seller, a tenant, a landlord, a managing agent, anything within the property market, then even if you're a landlord, it doesn't matter. It's for business purposes, the collection of that data is for business purposes, and so you need to be
compliant and fully POPI compliant.
Right.
Yes.
And the regulations require that every business does their personal information impact assessment. And this system, the POPI-Portal, is that personal information impact assessment to understand if you are compliant and where the risks are in your business in terms of POPI.
That's 100% correct. So it is going to obviously give you your personal information impact assessment. It's going to give you action plans as well as all your policies and procedures. So all your policy documents that you need to implement into your business to be fully POPI compliant.
Okay, Peter. So we're going to be doing this every 2 weeks.
Yes.
We are going to start it off in a similar fashion just to do a quick recap. We've done that. We've done governance. Go and rewatch that video if you're not yet finished with that particular module. From TPN's perspective, Peter, we did our personal information impact assessment in 2019 as the first
already.
version.
Yep.
And we did that in an Excel version.
Yes.
And things have moved on, and this is an annual task. But what we've done is a CEO of the business is ultimately the person responsible.
That's correct, yes.
I've outsourced that, nevertheless, to Greg Mennen, our attorney, for TPN's perspective from a practical implementation of the process. And so Greg set aside in his calendar literally an hour every day to go through the different, there are 130 sub-processes on the system.
Yep.
So Greg set aside an hour every day to go through each one of those different sub-processes, and as they relate to different people in our organization, he's bringing in those different people. So from a finance perspective, from TPN's perspective, we've got our financial manager involved.
Yes.
But from a governance perspective, it was Greg and I that were doing it.
Of course.
And so our suggestion is to our clients that they set up something similar. This is a journey. It's not I'm going to sit down today and get it done. Although in this particular webinar, the idea of the webinars is that we can do a function, take out a couple of the sub-processes, go through them, so we give context.
That's exactly it. And that's what we're trying to do through these sessions as well, specifically today's session. I mean, we are going to run through the budget sub-process, we're going to run through the sub-process, and then we're going to run through the payroll sub-process. But it's also to get you thinking in line in terms of POPI. The context that you need to use, the questions that you need to ask yourself in each and every single sub-process as to what you need to sort of implement and change in your business to mitigate and manage your risk in terms of your POPI profile.
Okay, so that's enough of an introduction. My job here today is to facilitate. So I'm now going to head over to the other side of the studio, and I am going to be asking the questions that come up in the chat, Peter. So for all of our delegates online, please do log into YouTube. That'll give you access to the chat on the right-hand side of your screen. You can ask the questions. Ask. My job is to, Peter, can I interrupt you?
You're more than welcome to, Michelle.
My job is to interrupt Peter and ask those questions on your behalf. So if you have a question in a process that Peter's busy with, ask the question right there and then. I'm going to interrupt you. We're going to deal with the question as it pops up. But if there are general questions,
That's it. And then we're going to leave those general questions for the 15-minute Q&A right at the end. We've also obviously got Greg Mennen in today on the live chat. So if there are specific POPI relatable questions, he will be on that chat as well.
In fact, we have Brian and Greg. So Brian, Brian's going to be there from a help desk perspective. Okay. So please ask questions, and if Brian can give you help desk support at that time, he's going to do that. And ask legal questions. Greg Mason, our attorney, will be answering those. And of course, I'm going to be interrupting Peter. So please do ask questions. It gives me no better joy.
Fantastic.
Kidding.
Let's just get
I'm
going.
just going to hand over to you, okay?
Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks, Peter.
Wonderful. Let's get going straight away into this. I know we don't have a lot of time today. It's only an hour session. We're going to take 45 minutes to go through the function of finance. Like we said, we have already gone through certain sub-processes or sub-functions in terms of the governance function. That YouTube video is up on the TPN YouTube channel, so you can go and have a look at that. But to access the finance function, obviously we are just going to go and click on the review all indicators right over there. And what you'll notice straight away is there are certain other sub-processes or sub-functions that we're not going to be dealing with today. The ones that we are, however, is going to be budgets, not companies tax. We're going to do debtors. We're not doing creditors and suppliers today. Financial operations, including reconciliations, insurance, fund management, but we are going to go through the payroll function as well. So you can see all those sub-processes have been allocated directly to the finance function. But like I said, for today's purposes, we are going to do it on budgets, we're going to do it on debtors, and we're going to do it on payroll specifically. And I'm going to try and give you as much context as possible. Remember, like what we did in the first module as well, we sort of gave you a case or a review case that we used. We used a specific property company to run all of these different processes and sub-functions under, and I'm going to be using that as an example today, just to show you exactly what type of context and what questions you need to ask yourself when you're going through these different sub-processes or sub-functions. So to go through the budgets sub-function, all I need to go and do is click review over there. Then, I know I'm going to reiterate myself. I apologize for that today. I'm also going to give you a lot of context, so please take note. But like what I said, we are going to run through the budget sub-function, and the descriptor under the budgets sub-function is very important. The descriptors are very important when it comes to answering the right questions and asking yourself the right questions when it comes to POPI. So on an annual basis, budgets are usually drawn up and might include some personal information in some areas such as salaries, leave accruals, and other areas. Normally personal information in this area is low. That makes a lot of sense because if you're going through debtors like your tenant book, there's obviously a lot of personal information or personal identifiable information that is going to be allocated to that sub-function. Whereas for budgets, not necessarily a lot of personal identifiable information in that sub-process. I'm going to select the accountable person who is going to take this over. Like we said, Michelle is overtly going to be the person that is going to be accountable for all of this, but we're going to select a person to do the review process specifically under general information. We're going to select Nikki. The progress status is currently in progress, and I'm going to set her due date, which is going to form part of my dashboard as well as my action plan later as well. Then I need to start answering questions on the actual personal identifiable information that is captured under budgets specifically. Remember, we're only doing budgets here. We're not going through debtors, we're not going through payroll, we're going to go through them later. We're only doing budgets. So what is contained in the budgets sub-function? And what do we have over here? What is the volume of personal information being processed in this sub-function? For me specifically, from this property company that we did, there was actually very low levels of personal identifiable information that was captured. Specifically, the company details. So the company identifiable information was captured. But for your own perspective as a property company, perhaps you're a property management company who manages budgets for body corporates, for HOAs, there might be more personal identifiable information that you are processing in your day-to-day functioning on your budgets. But for this, I'm going to select low because there was not a lot of personal identifiable information through this process. Does it contain sensitive personal information? So just give me a moment over here. I just want to display this for you as well. you can all see that there is this information little taggy over here. If you go and click on those, it is going to open up a separate page for you that is going to explain specifically what is sensitive personal information, what is special personal information, and what is GDPR information. So specifically on sensitive personal information, just to reiterate, let's quickly go through this. So I've already opened up my TPN wiki. Sensitive personal information is information that can identify the data subject. So it identifies the person, but possibly also the company, closed corporation, the juristic entity. This can include information such as data subjects, ID information, bank account details on individual or juristic entities, tax numbers, etc. So going back to that, does it contain sensitive personal information? No, in this instance, my budgets did not contain sensitive personal information. Does it contain special personal information? And if I go and have a look at special personal information, it includes specifically information like religious or philosophical beliefs, race or ethnic origin, trade union membership, political persuasion, as well as biometric information. So, does my budgets subfunction, do my budgets contain this information? No, it does not. Do my budgets contain personal information on European citizens? So if we go into that wiki, click over there, it is going to open up what the GDPR actually means. And that includes the General Data Protection Regulation that is specifically applicable to the European Union and European Union citizens. Now, for my budget functionality, it did not include information on that. Remember to click save, then it's going to process and it's going to take you through to the next section that you can answer questions on. So the next section is on the information actually being processed, where the information is stored,
Peter?
whether it's paper or electronic, or whether there's a certain level of access control. Yes, Michelle?
Peter, sorry, one quick question.
No problem.
Because I do see that some of our clients are here as in their capacity as managing agents.
Okay, great. Yes.
So managing agents, of course, one of the functions that they have is to prepare budgets for each one of their different
That's correct.
Complexes or homeowners
Yes.
associations. In that case, they may have many budgets with identifiable information identifying which budget each one of those belong to.
That's 100% correct. And it could contain personal information or sensitive personal information on specifically, say, for example, the HOA or body corporate. So it's very possible. So that's why we're saying this is contextual based. You need to ask yourself these questions when it comes to your business and your business implementation of POPI. Can I move on then, Michelle?
Please,
Thank
Peter.
you. Okay. So with the information processed, the system where the information stored for us was not applicable because we didn't store any information on the budgetary information or personal information on a specific system. So I'm just going to include not applicable on this. Well, I can't even spell today. I apologize for that. Okay. Paper or electronic, it was stored on, let's do none. It wasn't stored anywhere, like I said. And the level of access control on this specifically, we are going to select none as well. Okay. So we are going to go just click save. The control measures in place. Regardless of the amount of personal information that's being processed, we're not asking these questions. Now we're asking what control measures are in place specifically. And what we've done over here is when we go and prepare our budgets, we've obviously got certain procedures that we need to follow. Specifically for the budgets, we said we have checklists in place. We have some level of electronic access control, physical access control. There is some sort of management review, monthly reporting, and there might be policies and procedures in place that regulate specifically how to draw up these budgets. So we're going to click on those and we're going to click save. Now it comes to the important questions. And the important questions relate specifically to the 8 pillars of lawful processing in terms of the Protection of Personal Information Act. So we need to answer questions specifically on those, and they relate specifically to openness and how information is actually processed in your business, taking into consideration the specific levels of POPI. Now, if you'd like to go and have a look at that, all of these information tabs are obviously available to you. I've already opened that up, but the 8 pillars of lawful processing when it comes to processing your personal information in your business in terms of POPI is accountability, processing limitation, purpose specification, further process limitations, information quality, openness, security safeguards, and data subject participation. I'm going to go into these individually a little bit through this session as well, just to explain to you how to answer these questions as well when it comes to that, but let's just jump into the important questions straight away. So, is the processing of personal information taking place lawfully? Here you need to ask yourself, are we processing personal information at all through my budgets? As we know, I've already given you that context of the property company that we have used as our case study. They actually did not process any personal information through their budget. So I'm going to click not applicable. Is the processing of personal information done in a reasonable manner? And obviously these are going to change substantially when we're heading into the debtors and the payroll section. This is just to show you that certain sub-functions are not necessarily going to contain personal information that relates directly to POPI. This one was also not applicable. Have you applied the rule of minimality when it comes to processing personal information? Once again, we're not processing personal information over here, so we're going to select not applicable. Is the collection of personal information being done for a specific and explicitly defined purpose? Once again, not applicable because we're not processing information here. Have you obtained consent from all the data subjects? Once again, not applicable. We're not processing personal information in this regard, and we don't need the consent because we're not processing personal information. Click on Save. Then the data usage questions, also relating directly to the 8 pillars of lawful processing in terms of POPI. Do you notify the data subject as required by POPI when collecting personal information? Once again, not applicable for budgets. Has the retention and restriction of records been formalized in this area? We are going to go, this one I actually said yes, because specifically on this, perhaps there is some form of process that you're already formalizing, and there's a process that you're busy following. Like we said, on your checklists or on your policies and procedures, there might be something like that. Is personal information in this area used for another purpose, other for the purpose for which it is collected in the first place? We're going to go not applicable. Have you ensured that personal information in this area is updated? Once again, not applicable. We're not processing personal information. And are you satisfied that the appropriate safety measures have been taken into consideration? For this, because it's budgets, because we're not processing personal information, I'm quite happy that we followed the correct procedures and we've got procedures and policies in place. And then I'm going to click Save. What you'll see automatically is that the system has already updated your indicators for you. And what you'll notice is under your budget sub-process, we've already created a low inherent risk. And the reason for that is because we're not processing personal information in terms of your budgets. There is specifically no residual risk as a result of us not processing that personal information. And then there's low behavioral risk because we've got certain policies and procedures and checklists and things in place. Should we process personal information in this regard? You can obviously go and click the review question again if you'd like to go through it again and fill it out if you've done something incorrectly.
Peter,
yes, Michelle.
I see what you've done there. So what you've done is you've showcased us something on a process where there's low information to give us an idea of the outcome. And next, we're going to look at our debtors, which would be our tenants, our buyers, our sellers, our landlords, etc.
That's correct.
And we're going to have, potentially, we're going to have a high inherent risk.
That is correct, Michelle. Like I said, we've got to give you context in using the system. We understand, I mean, even when Greg sat through the session with me yesterday and we were going through the sales sub-process for TPN, we needed to ask ourselves the questions and we actually needed to discuss it together to come to, let's call it the correct answer to the POPI relatable question when it came to sales processes and the correct policies and procedures in place. So that's exactly what you need to do. And hopefully through these training sessions, you'll be able to see exactly how you should be answering these questions. The next one up is going to be debtors, and obviously that is going to contain a lot more personal information that is being processed through my business. Once again, I can just click on the review button over there and it is going to open up my page like this. Once again, I'm going to read the descriptor. It's vitally important. Do so yourself as well, just to put you in the mind frame of answering these questions correctly. So, debtors are your customers that are paying for your products and services. Debtors can be natural as well as juristic persons. Very important. In this area, there is normally a medium or high amount of personal identifiable information being processed or used internally or shared with a third party to manage your debtors. When we're talking about debtors in the context of an estate agency, perhaps, let's look at tenants specifically. From a body corporate or a HOA management company, you could be looking at owners of the property. So it is going to differ depending on which business you are currently busy running. The accountable person, I'm going to choose myself as the accountable person. It is in progress and I have set myself a date that is already come and gone. I have done this, hopefully. I don't know yet. So, personal identifiable information. Once again, you've got to ask yourself these specific questions when it comes to the personal information being processed under your debtors book, in your debtors subfunction. Remember, we've already done budgets. We're moving over to debtors right away. Okay, so the volume of personal information being processed in this function. For me, I'm going to use our case study once again. They had 500 tenants that they were busy managing. They were not doing sales, they were not doing management. However, they had 500 tenants. In my mind, that's quite a high number of volume. That's quite a high volume of personal information being processed. So I'm going to go and select high. Does it contain sensitive personal information? Once again, you can click on the information buttons. Let's just go back to sensitive personal information. Remember, it includes things like ID numbers as well as bank details. So most certainly, in terms of your debtors subfunction, you are going to have information that is sensitive, and we're going to select yes. Does it contain special personal information as defined by POPI? Now, specifically, special personal information, once again, includes this A to F sort of religious, philosophical beliefs, race, ethnic, religion, like we did in the budget subfunction. But my debtors specifically did not include this information. Does it contain personal information on European citizens? For the specific case study, yes, they did have information on GDPR citizens. So I'm going to select yes, and once again, I'm going to click the save button. Where my system or where my personal information is being stored on my system. For us, it was stored in a data management system as well as in internal server. So I'm just going to go fill that out. Hopefully for all of you who do not have property management systems, you're going to ask me, but what is RentBook? RentBook is our free to use property management system. So you're more than welcome to ask us questions on that as well. But I'm going to click RentBook and server, or rather input RentBook and server. Is it stored on paper or electronic format? It is stored on paper as well as electronic for this business, and the level of access control that they actually had was quite well controlled. They've got physical or electronic access control methods that we're going to see in the control measures question as soon as we go through this. I'm going to click save and then move over to my control measures. Now, what control measures did we put in place as a business to make sure that the information for my debtors is secure and it is not being accessed by third parties? We had policies and procedures in place. We specifically had management review, because management would review the debtors book each and every single month. There was reporting specifically on that as well. There was both physical as well as electronic access control. So once again, also, if you scroll over these control measures, you'll notice that a little example pops up. So passwords, encryption, and other antivirus for electronic, whereas physical would be things like alarm systems, lock doors, electronic access tags. All of those will fall under there. And then we're going to click save. Now, once again, comes to the important questions. The important questions that you need to ask yourself in terms of the 8 pillars of lawful processing in terms of POPI. Just to reiterate, once again, those are the specific 8 pillars. You can just go and click on the first one, and then it's going to open that up for you as well. So, is the processing of personal information taking place lawfully? Yes, it is. It is done lawfully, specifically because we are doing it for a defined purpose. It is transparent, it is open, specifically taking into consideration those 8 pillars.
Peter,
yes, Michelle.
If I could also interrupt,
of course.
Tenants, for landlords, for sellers, buyers, even for managing agents collecting information on owners, they have a responsibility through FICA as an accountable institution to collect this information. So on top of collecting the information, there is a lawful reason for that information to be collected in the property industry.
We're actually thinking with the same mind here. With the data usage questions, the next one, I actually brought up FICA and made notes on FICA. It's also good. Okay. Is the processing of personal information done in a reasonable manner so that it doesn't infringe on the data subject's privacy? In this regard, yes, it was done. It's done for a specific purpose. Have you applied the rule of minimality? So we're only collecting the personal information that we're supposed to collect. We're not collecting more information than what is actually required, so we are using the principle of minimality. Yes, we were. Is the collection of personal information being done for a specific and explicitly defined purpose? Yes, it is. What? For collections. We need to collect the money from our debtors. So yes, that has been done. And have you obtained consent from all data subjects in this area where it is considered mandatory according to the Act? This little information wiki, I just want to go through with you as well, because it's vitally important to know when we need consent and when we don't need consent. So I've opened that up already. How do you know if you need consent from clients and if it is mandatory? Let's just quickly go through this. Personal information may not be processed without consent unless any one of the factual scenarios in Section 11 of POPI is applicable. If any of the factual scenarios is present, consent is not needed. The factual scenarios include if it is required to conclude or perform the contract. Interesting. The parties processing the personal information is required to do so by law. It's the one we're getting at now. The processing protects a legitimate interest of the consumer. The processing is necessary for the performance of a public law duty, or it is done in pursuit of the legitimate interests of the responsible party. Now, consent requirements when it comes to debtors sending out letters of demand, the information actually required to collect rental is obviously going to fall into a number of categories over here. But the first one that comes to mind, it is required to conclude or perform the contract. You need money in terms of your lease agreement, thus you may utilize the personal information to obviously collect that amount of money. So, have you obtained consent? In this regard, yes, we can say we have obtained the consent, but in certain instances it might not even be applicable because, of course, it falls under that category. And then I'm going to click Save. Data usage questions. Do you notify the data subject as required by POPI when collecting the information? This is specifically not applicable. We don't need to notify them in terms of that. Has the retention and restriction of records been formalized in this area? Yes, it has. And this is where FICA comes in as well, Michelle, because remember, we in terms of FICA can only utilize or use the information or store the information for a specific number of years. That is going to be 5 years from the date of the transaction ending. So you've got this restriction of information or restriction of records already in place. We're going to say yes. Is personal information in this area used for another purpose other than for collecting or other for the purpose than what it was collected in the first place? Hopefully you're going to say no, you're not selling all the information of your tenants to other parties. Have you ensured that personal information in this area is updated on a regular basis? I hope you do so. Remember, each and every single year we would suggest anyway collecting all the information that you require in terms of FICA from your tenants. So yes, we're going to say that. Are you satisfied that the appropriate security measures are in place to ensure confidentiality, integrity and availability of personal information? And we're going to select yes on that one as well. And then click Save. So you see right now already that we're answering we're asking ourselves very similar questions when it comes to the different sub-process, but you're going to answer them in a completely different way, because obviously in terms of your budgets, in terms of your debtors, or in terms of your payroll, you're collecting different information on each and every single sub-function. So if we go back to the finance, or rather the overview on finance, you'll notice already that we've got a high inherent risk. And the reason for that is those first 4 questions. We are collecting a high volume of personal information. It includes sensitive personal information as well as information on GDPR citizens. The residual risk is low. That's interesting. The reason for that is because I've already put in place certain control measures, access control, physical, electronic, as well as those other control measures like the checks and balances, monthly management reviews. Those have all already taken place. And then the behavioural risk as a result of the 8 pillars of lawful processing in terms of POPI being compliant and me answering all those questions in the affirmative is going to come out as low as a result of me doing all these things. Then moving over to payroll. Now payroll once again is going to be something that contains quite a lot of personal information because it contains information on who? On your employees. So once again, let's just read through this. Payroll may be processed internally, or think about this, by a third party, which may increase the risk. This could include pay information as well as provisional tax. Payroll usually has a high amount of personal identifiable information and may also contain sensitive information such as ID numbers. Already setting yourself up for answering these questions in the context of payroll. Select the accountable person. I've given myself a lot of work here. Peter Mennen once again, the progress status is assigned and my due date has already come and gone. But you can obviously select different due dates on that as well. Just by clicking there, I'm going to select my next due date. Let's call it January the 29th. I'm going to click Save. Then the personal identifiable information. And once again, you need to ask yourself these questions in line with the information wikis. I'm not going to go through them once again. We've already done that twice. But remember, sensitive personal information has a specific definition. Special personal information has a specific definition. And then personal information on GDPR, European Union citizens, obviously also has a specific definition as well. So the volume of personal information processed for this specific company, for our case study, they had 10 employees. So I'm going to say medium. Does it contain sensitive personal information? Yes, it does, because it contains information that is identifiable to the specific data subject, which may include things like ID numbers. Does it contain special personal information? In this instance, no, it did not contain special personal information. And remember, that definition of special personal information has already been set out for you in terms of the wikis. So you need to go and have a look at your own specific payroll and go and have a look if that information is actually being captured. So we're going to go no. And does it contain special or personal information on European citizens or GDPR citizens? We're going to say no. In this instance, it also did not. We're going to click Save. Where my personal information is being stored. Once again, for this, we are going to use the system of Simple Pay, plus some of the Excel spreadsheets, some of the payroll information might be stored on an internal server as well. So we're going to go that, internal server. Paper or electronic. Specifically for this, it was both paper and electronic based. I'm going to click both. The level of access control, once again on this, because they do have some electronic access control measures in place, so not everybody can see the payroll information that is displayed either on Simple Pay or on their internal systems, is going to be well controlled. We're going to click Save, and we're going to move over to those control questions once again. Now, specifically on payroll, there was actually quite a lot of policies and procedures and certain control measures that this business put in place to make sure that they're doing the right things each and every single month when they're running payroll. I'm sure you do that as well. So they had policies and procedures in place. They had management review in place. They had specifically monthly reporting in place, as well as physical and electronic access or control measures in place. And then you click Save once again. The important questions, reiteration, 8 pillars of lawful processing in terms of POPI. You can access that through the information wikis, like we said. Is it being processed lawfully? Yes, it has been taken place lawfully. Is the processing of personal information done in a reasonable manner, not to infringe the data subject's privacy? Yes, it was done. Have you applied the rule of minimality? Yes, we did that. Is the collection of personal information being done for a specific reason? Obviously it is. It's specifically for payroll. We're not using it for another specific purpose. And then have you obtained consent from all the data subjects in this area where it is considered mandatory? I'm going to reiterate this once again. I just want to go back into that specific wiki. And remember, the first one on that list is it is required to conclude or perform the contract. They've got an employment contract. You need to process the information so that the payroll can actually run. So we're going to utilize that, and we're going to say it is not applicable because we do not need their consent. And then we click Yes. For the data usage questions, we are going to answer these quite quickly, but we didn't notify because we don't need to. It's not applicable. Has the retention and restriction of records been formalized? Yes, it has been done in this area. Is personal information in this area used for another purpose? No, it had not been used for another purpose. Have you ensured that personal information in this area is updated on a regular basis? Yes, this company has done so. And are you satisfied that the appropriate security and control measures were in place? They actually selected partially because they wanted to incorporate certain other procedures in place. They wanted to amend their policies and procedures as well to make sure that when they are running their payroll and processing the personal information, they are mitigating and managing specifically the risk of that information being seen by a third party who wasn't supposed to see it. And then you click Save. And once again, very simply, if you go into your finance overview once again, you will notice that we've got a medium inherent risk. Remember, that's from the questions that we asked ourselves right at the beginning again. There is a low residual risk as a result of us having control measures and things in place. And then the behavioural risk is also low because we are taking into consideration the 8 pillars of lawful processing in terms of POPI, and we are following policies and procedures and making sure that the retention of the documents, including the minimality of the information being processed, is done correctly in terms of POPI. And that is it. We've gone through the budgets subfunction, the debtors subfunction, as well as the payroll subfunctions. We've answered them in, let's call it, different ways, just to show you that there is definitely context that you need to use when you're asking these questions. But remember, TPN is here to assist. It's not just through these TPN YouTube videos. It's not just through the YouTube channel. If you'd like to communicate with us, if you've got any questions regarding the specific system, if you've got any questions regarding budgets, debtors, payroll, whatever it might be, you're more than welcome to contact us. Remember, we're contactable on our normal numbers that Greg and Michelle will put up in the chat, as well as the normal email addresses that you can utilize to make sure your questions are answered by us in-house whenever you need to. Michelle, that brings us to the close of the formal session. Are there any questions that have been asked?
Peter, what I suggest if we could do next, can
Yes.
we quickly run through the action plan? So what we've done from TPN's perspective is we've left Greg in charge of our overall action plan, and then he outsources certain of those actions to different
The responsibilities
parties.
in terms of...
Exactly.
Great.
But maybe if we could just showcase that action plan,
Okay.
so that people know that, certainly from our perspective, as we were going through the different sub-processes, a couple of action points would pop up, we would log them, and then we would allocate a time for delivery, and different people are then responsible for the delivery of that.
I know we did this in the first module, but you know what, I'm going to start at staff rather, because obviously you need to assign certain of the responsibilities, like Greg would assign something to me in terms of the action plan. So if you'd like to add people to the staff list, it's very, very simple. You literally just go into staff, you click on add, and then you go and fill out the person's details specifically on the system, and it is going to give you a staff member that you can assign the responsibilities to. So Greg has already done through the system, and if we go into the action plan, he's already created something for me to go and do in terms of my action plan. So like I said, the company in question, the case study that we used, specifically on payroll, wanted to put different policies and procedures in place to make sure that they are managing and mitigating their risk in the terms of the processing of personal information. So they would have gone and done that, and they would have specifically added a action plan, what they need to do next in terms of their POPI procedure to be able to be fully compliant. But what Greg has already done for me is under the area of governance, he's added me into monthly meetings for information security. So we'll discuss specifically information security in the business when it is concerned to governance, and what the status is, as well as how far that process is and the due date. To do so yourself is very, very simple. You just click on add over there. You add a short title for this task. Greg actually gave me one yesterday, if I can remember it correctly. We needed to give staff training. So let's put that up. So we are going to say it is staff training.
Because Peter, staff training is actually a requirement in law.
It's incredibly important, specifically when it comes to, let's call it, the processing of personal information from a sales perspective or from a rentals perspective. Remember, you're collecting application documents, you're collecting FIC information, you're collecting bank details. You're actually collecting a lot of personal information, but also sensitive personal information. It could even be special personal information that you're collecting. So staff training is vitally important. The focus area for this is going to be people. My due date, let's say it is going to be once again at the end of Jan. The task priority for this is very high. because we need to get that training done. The status is going to be assigned because I'm going to present that training. The percentage complete is going to be 0. The link people, possibly, let's say Valdo is going to help me for the specific training, and then the action that needs to take place is going to be something like staff training to be done on a monthly basis. So we can go and fill those out, and then we can go and click save. So let's just go staff training over here so that I can process that. I'm going to click save, and then it's going to open up my specific action plan and the things that I need to do in terms of the system to make myself fully POPI compliant.
Fantastic, Peter, thanks very much. Folks, I'm not seeing any questions. I think we've covered this one quite well. Jeffrey did ask a question regarding, for example, his service provider from a payroll perspective. Can he ask them for a POPI compliance certificate to say that that particular service provider is POPI compliant?
That's a very interesting question. I'm going to answer it first in saying yes, it's great to do so, specifically from a service provider or a third party that's doing something for you, to ask them for a POPI compliance certificate. But inherently, the risk and the responsibility of making sure that you are POPI compliant still stays with you, regardless of you, let's call it saving information or storing information through a third party, or them specifically running your payroll or whatever it might be. You still have the responsibility in making sure that you and the third party is going to be POPI compliant. So you can't shift the responsibility onto a third party. It will still be your responsibility to do so. But yes, it is a good idea, specifically from third party service providers who are busy doing certain functions or responsibilities for you, to ask for POPI compliance documents. Definitely, yes.
Peter, could you please remind our delegates that in the closing moments that we're going through at the moment, if they wouldn't mind filling in our feedback form that I've posted?
So there is a link that you've already posted in the chat that reverts you to our feedback forms. Please go and fill those out. Not just important for our own purposes, for our own feedback, of course, but for your unverified CPD points that you will be getting after this training session. But please go and fill those out for us. Vitally, vitally, vitally important.
Peter, in that case, I don't have any further questions, and I am happy to close the session. If anybody else has any more questions, I'm quite happy to answer them online in the chat.
Wonderful. Have we put up the contact details just for TPN as well as the email addresses, please? That would be great.
I have put up the contact details, legal@tpn.co.za. If you want to get in touch with our legal team, I've got Peter, Jade, and Greg all available to answer questions. Of course, if you want to get hold of our help desk, it's helpdesk@tpn.co.za. Brian and his team will be looking after you there. And if you want to chat to someone, by all means, 0861 876 000.
That's it. Thank you very much, everybody. And please join us for Module 3, which is going to take place in 2 weeks' time as well. Watch out for the notifications. And please remember to subscribe to the TPN YouTube channel and click the notifications bell so that you are notified of any further training sessions that do come up. Have a lovely day further.